Daniel Sports Central, we go for our 2022 college football predictions for the Arkansas Razorbacks, one of the top teams in the SEC in the 2021 season, as this team went 9-4 overall. And they're also one of the big surprise teams of the 2021 season. I mean, Arkansas was not expected to get 9 wins last season, but this team shows major potential going into 2022. Could this team be even better in the 2022 season? That's what we go over here today. We'll be analyzing this team, predicting their schedule game by game in this video, starting out with your team trends. Arkansas, once again, 9-4 last season. It was a very good season for this team, 4-2 in their first 6 games, 5-2 in their last 7, and they had several significant wins. I mean, September was an outstanding month for Arkansas. This team beat Texas 40-21, number 15 team in the nation at the time. And after that game, Arkansas really, I mean, they looked very good in that game against the Longhorns, and people started to take them more seriously heading into week 3. And then, of course, week 4, they beat Texas A&M 20-10, number 7 team in the nation there. So, I mean, going into October, this team looked really good. They were looking like potentially one of the better teams in the SEC. Ended up losing to Ole Miss on October 9th, 51-52. Obviously, a brutal loss there. That game was one of the best of the 2021 season, and Ole Miss ended up stealing that win there by 1. But they beat Mississippi State 31-28. That was a huge win in November, and they lost to Alabama by only a touchdown, 35-42. Kept that game close on the road. I mean, Alabama was outstanding last season, and Arkansas went neck and neck with them. And of course, they beat Penn State in their bowl game to finish out the season 24-10. So, outstanding season for Arkansas. I mean, that's one of the best seasons we've seen out of the Razorbacks, and I mean, it's been a while. And I feel like Arkansas is a team that I think they're here to stay. I really like where this team is, and I feel like this team is definitely. I mean, this team could be even better. I feel like in the 2022 season. I mean, their schedule is tough. I mean, if you look at 2021 and how this team was, I mean, they had low expectations. This team really wasn't expected to be incredibly good last season. And I mean, if you look at how they did, I mean, they kept it close against some really good opponents. And the one exception is that Georgia game on October 2nd, lost to Georgia 37-0. So yeah, that was a brutal loss there on the road. And I mean, Georgia was eventually national champion, but I mean, either way, still an outstanding season for Arkansas. But looking at your roster preview going into next season, this team does return KJ Jefferson. Last season, he exceeded expectations. He put up 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 picks. That's a very, very good touchdown interception ratio, and also had a 67% completion rate. He was on the ground as well for over 600 yards and 6 touchdowns. So KJ Jefferson, huge to have him back. He's definitely got some upside heading into next season. Traylon Smith is transferring away, the top running back for this team. It would be, I mean, that'd be huge if you could have him back, but unfortunately, he has taken off. He put up nearly 600 yards and 5 touchdowns last season on the ground. Raheem Sanders, second running back, is returning. Same with Dominique Johnson. So you got Sanders and Johnson both coming back, who combined for over 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns last season. So there's plenty of depth in the backfield, so I'm not too concerned at all about the running back situation. Plus, you got KJ Jefferson, who is a dual threat quarterback, so it looks really good there. Receiving core, you do lose your top receiver in Treylon Burks. Put up over 1,200 yards of offense, 12 touchdowns. That's obviously going to be probably the most impactful loss on this offense and maybe even on this team. Treylon Burks was a major impact player last season, incredibly talented, and he's got a bright future in the NFL. But you do return your second receiver, Warren Thompson. Last season, he put up 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and of course, you lose your third receiver in Tyson Morris, who put up just over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, got Warren Thompson coming back, but he didn't really have too big of an impact on this team last season. It was Treylon Burks who really had a huge impact in the receiving core, but there is a decent amount of depth in the receiving core, so I'm not too terribly concerned. You lose 2 on the defensive or on the offensive line, you lose 3 on the defensive line, then 1 linebacker and 1 in the secondary, so you lose 5 starters on the defense, which isn't too terribly concerning. Most teams lose 4 to 5 on the defense anyway. Thing is about Arkansas, though, this team does have a very difficult schedule next season. We'll get into that in a second here, but I mean, that certainly could be an obstacle for this team. And I mean, you're also in the SEC, which is the toughest conference in college football. You got Georgia and Alabama, who potentially could both go 12-0 next season. It is very possible that we see that happen. And so, I mean, in Arkansas having to face against multiple brutal SEC opponents. It's going to be tough, but is this team an SEC contender next season? Are they a potential dark horse contender in the SEC? And I feel like this team very much is. I mean, the SEC is a brutal conference, and any team could be good in any season, except for Vanderbilt, of course. But the Razorbacks, this is a team that I expect them to, once again, be a contender next season in that SEC West. I mean, I've got Alabama winning the SEC West, and they're probably my favorite to win the national title next season, but I do feel like Arkansas could definitely cause some noise in the SEC next season. Transfer portal and recruiting going to next season. Jaden Hazelwood's coming in, receiver from Oklahoma, so you had some depth in the receiving position there. You bring in Cade Fortin as well, a quarterback from South Florida. You also bring in an edge rusher from LSU, Landon Jackson. You do lose a few players. I mean, the transfer portal in general has actually been really good for Arkansas, but you do lose Devin Bush, defensive back Greg Brooks as well. But you do bring in Drew Sanders, linebacker from Alabama, Latavius Brenny, safety from Georgia, and you also bring in Dwight McLauthrin, a defensive back from LSU. Traylon Smith, running back, is off to UTSA. You also lose Andrew Parker and Nick Turner. You bring in edge rusher Jordan Dominic, who is coming in from Georgia Tech. You also you lose Mateo Soli, edge rusher to Hawaii. You bring in Terry Hampton, defensive lineman from Arkansas State. You bring in also Matt Landers, a receiver from Toledo, but you do lose edge rusher Dorian Gerald, who really hasn't had that big of an impact, but he's in the transfer portal. Recruiting-wise, 28th in the nation, which isn't terrible. I mean, 28th in the nation is not bad at all, but it really tells you something when 20th position in the nation is 13th in the SEC. I mean, Arkansas is 13th in the recruiting in the conference in the SEC, which is pretty low when you see that. But I mean, this team is 20th in the nation, which isn't bad at all. If you look at it nationally, it's just the SEC is the superior conference when it comes to recruiting. You got 5 4-stars coming in and then 14 3-stars. So, I mean, your recruiting isn't terrible. It's just in comparison to the SEC, it is fairly low. But the transfer portal has, I would say, been to Arkansas's benefit going into next season. But that said, look at your schedule now going into next season. Once again, as I said before, it is a brutal schedule. You got Cincinnati, who made the college football playoff next season. They won't be as good next season. They're going to be going into a rebuild here heading into 2022, but you could consider Cincinnati to potentially be a top 25, top 30 team next year. So they're not a pushover team in week 1. Then you got South Carolina. They could be decent next year. Then Missouri State on the 17th. Texas A&M in a neutral location. You beat them last year. Then you got Alabama coming to town on the 1st. Mississippi State on the road on the 8th. Then you go to BYU. BYU is another one of your non-conference games. BYU could be good next season again. I wouldn't be surprised to see them top 20 and in that 8 to 10 win range at least next season. And then you got Auburn on the road after that, after your bye week. Then you got Liberty as another one of your non-conference games. Liberty, I mean, they're always a decent team. So, I mean, your non-conference games, if you look at it, you got Cincinnati, Missouri State, BYU, and Liberty. BYU, Liberty, and Cincinnati all should be decent teams next season, especially BYU and Cincinnati. So, I mean, your non-conference games are tough. You got LSU then after that, Ole Miss at home as well, and then Missouri on the road to finish out the regular season. So, but looking at September here, Cincinnati, I am going to pick Arkansas to win that matchup. The Razorbacks are at home, plus Cincinnati going once again into a rebuild. I do feel like I'm pretty comfortable picking Arkansas in that matchup, but the Bearcats, once again, they should get 9 to 10 wins next season. They should be up there, but I just don't expect them to make it to the college football playoff again, at least for a couple more years. South Carolina, they could be decent. Spencer Rattler, I mean, that's a team that could be a contender. Potentially 6 to 8 wins for them, but I do want to favor Arkansas there as well. Missouri State, easy wins. You start off the season 3-0, and then you got Texas A&M. That's a team that I could see 10 to 11 wins next season. The Aggies look very good recruiting. You got the top recruiting class for the 2022 class, and Texas A&M is looking very good. They also return multiple of their key players from last season, so I expect them to be a contender. Aggies get the win there. Moving into October, you got Alabama coming to town. That's a game that potentially Arkansas, having that game at home, this Arkansas can be a rowdy place when you get a big crowd in there, and I feel like that could be a potential upset game. Arkansas upsets Alabama, but I'm going to pick the Crimson Tide there in a close one. I do think Arkansas rivals up against the Crimson Tide, similar to how they did last year, but in the end, Alabama gets the win. Mississippi State on the road I could easily see the Razorbacks winning that one, but Mississippi State's a tough place to play. They could be decent next season, so I will favor the Bulldogs in that one, in a close one. BYU, I will favor Arkansas in that matchup against BYU, but certainly that is not a pushover game. BYU is going to be a decent team next season again. And then you got Auburn to finish out your October. Auburn, that's going to be a close one, but I do want to favor the Tigers there. I feel like, I mean, it's after your bye, so you do have a bye week there, but I do think I want to favor Auburn in that matchup. They should be an 8 to 10 win team next season. So, I mean, October in general is just an absolutely brutal month for this team. Alabama, Mississippi State, BYU, and Auburn. You got 3 road games against 4 good opponents. It's going to be a tough month, but looking at November, it gets a bit easier. You got Liberty, easy win there. I expect you to win that one by more than 2 touchdowns. LSU, Ole Miss, both wins for Arkansas, but close ones. And then Missouri to finish out the season on the road. I'll favor Arkansas there by a couple of touchdowns. I think Missouri next season, not expecting too much out of them. But LSU, Ole Miss, both at home. I mean, Ole Miss could be decent next season. I mean, they're losing quite a bit, though, and LSU, never know about them. But I'm going to go 8-4 for Arkansas next season. I think 8-4 is incredibly reasonable. I mean, this team, if they had an easier schedule, I mean, once again, your non-conference schedule, I don't expect you to lose any of your non-conference games, but I mean, Cincinnati, BYU, Liberty is your non-conference games. Those are tough. Plus, you're in the SEC West. You got to play Texas A&M, Alabama, both who are excellent teams, and I mean, Ole Miss and LSU. So I mean, it's a challenge, but I do think Arkansas does get up to 8 wins next season, which once again is a pretty good scenario. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Arkansas. And I appreciate you guys for watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.